The Justice Department is reportedly divided over a highly anticipated upcoming report by the department's Inspector General. Michael Horowitz has been looking into whether the FBI acted legally and appropriately in its surveillance of the Trump campaign in 2016. President Trump said he thinks findings from the investigation will be, quote, devastating for his critics once it's out next Monday. But now we have learned Attorney General William Barr is apparently disputing one of the report's main conclusions, that the FBI did have sufficient evidence to launch its investigation into the Trump campaign. The president was asked about this earlier today, and here's what he had to say.
I have not seen the report. Perhaps he's read the report. I think he was quoted incorrectly. I do believe that because I'm hearing the report is very powerful, but I'm hearing that by reading lots of different things, not from inside information, it's really from outside information. I think all we have to do is wait. Isn't it going to be released on Monday or so? I think we have to read it and we have to see it. But I hear there's a lot of devastating things in that report, but we'll see what happens.
CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge is tracking this story for us. She's in our Washington bureau. Hi, Catherine. So what more do we know about what the report says and why Barr may have an issue with it?
Well, Tanya, for some context and to set the table for folks at home, there was the initial surveillance warrant application for this former Trump campaign aide, and that was secured in October of 2016, about 2 weeks before the presidential election. And then it was extended 3 times. There were multiple renewals, one every 90 days, until the late summer, early fall of 2017, when the surveillance warrant was allowed to expire. What we know from our reporting here at CBS News, and a source who is familiar with the IG's draft findings, is that multiple representations to the National Security Court were, quote, deficient. And the reason that matters is because it creates a possible scenario that IG Horowitz has found that the initial application in October of 2016 met the high legal standard for the National Security Court, but the multiple renewals were deficient or defective and did not. And that matters because there's a special responsibility on the government to provide any new evidence to the FISA court so they can be aware of what's called exculpatory evidence. And that is evidence that would undercut the application itself. So we'll see how much daylight there really is between Attorney General Barr and the Inspector General Michael E. Horowitz on Monday when the report is made public, Tanya.
But so just to drill down, the issue really centers around the renewals and whether there was enough evidence to keep renewing the warrant.
Well, based on my reporting, and it's a single source who is familiar with the draft findings, it does seem to focus on the renewals and whether the FBI and Justice Department provided new evidence that was available to them, and they provided it to the National Security Court in a timely fashion. And that's the key component here, the, quote, timely fashion. So in a way that the court could understand whether the application and the renewal continued to meet that high legal standard, Tanya.
All right. So once this report is out, is there any indication as to whether anyone within the DOJ or the FBI could face criminal charges?
Well, our source who's familiar with the draft findings told us that they understood that multiple criminal referrals were likely in this particular case. Since we've confirmed here at CBS News that a former FBI attorney was criminally referred under investigation for allegedly falsifying documents related to this surveillance warrant application. What we don't know simply is how important that document was to the overall application or the subsequent renewals. And just to give you a sense of how complicated these documents are, right here in 2018, there was a declassification of the Carter Page FISA warrant. This is it here in the multiple renewals, and it's hundreds of pages in length, and almost all of it is redacted. So the key question, Tanya, is whether this document was foundational, it made a difference to the application and renewals, or whether when you took it out of the mix, the FBI and Justice Department could still attain that surveillance warrant for Carter Page.
Not easy going through that redacted document.
No, it will not be.
So the president today said, Catherine, that while this IG report is important, he suggested the Durham report is the one he's most interested in. Let's listen to what he said about it.
I do think the big report to wait for is going to be the Durham report. That's the one that people are really waiting for. And he's highly respected, and he's worked very hard, and he's worked long hours, I can tell you, and gone all over the world. So we'll see. But the Durham report is a report people are really looking forward to. But this is
Now, the president is referencing U.S. Attorney John Durham's investigation. Catherine, remind us what his scope is for that investigation and how it's different from the IG's report.
Well, the simplest way to think of this is that we've had two independent investigations running down different tracks. Inspector General Horowitz has been looking specifically at the surveillance warrant and the renewals for the Trump campaign aid. But John Durham has had a much broader mandate. He is allowed to look at the origins of the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into alleged collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign. So simply put, John Durham has the ability to interview people and gather evidence that goes outside the FBI and the Justice Department to agencies like the CIA. And he's also allowed to go back in time, really into 2016 and perhaps even 2015, if he finds that's where the evidence leads.
And have we heard anything from the Justice Department about Durham's report? And when can we expect to see Durham's report?
Well, Durham's report is likely expected sometime in the new year, but I don't want to go too far because that would simply be speculation. Late last night, the Justice Department did release a statement publicly on the record to reporters that seemed to minimize any daylight between the Attorney General and Inspector General Horowitz. It reads, "The Inspector General's investigation is a credit to the Department of Justice. His excellent work has uncovered significant information that the American people will soon be able to read for themselves. Rather than speculating, people should read the report for themselves next week, watch the Inspector General's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and draw their own conclusions about these important matters." So seeming to suggest that there may not be as much daylight between the two, Horowitz and Barr, as the Washington Post was first to report, Tanya.
All right. Well, Catherine Herridge, we thank you so much for your reporting.
You're welcome.